Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to untangle a really high-stakes clash between a massive energy corporation and a local city. We're talking about taxes, land rights, and incredibly, a dormant volcano. We're diving into a landmark Supreme Court case, Republic versus the city of Kidapawan. And honestly, this one has a bit of everything. A national park, a multi-million peso tax bill, and a massive legal tug-of-war that really forces us to ask the big question: who actually owns the financial benefits of our natural resources?
Okay, let's look at our agenda real quick. We'll be covering 1. The geothermal standoff, 2. The legal battle lines, 3. Who really benefits, 4. The limits of tax exemption, and 5. The Supreme Court's verdict. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The geothermal standoff, a national park, a power plant, and a tax bill.
So our story actually kicks off at Mount Apo, which, as you probably know, is a majestic peak and a protected national park. But back in 1992, the government carved a section out of this park to create a geothermal reservation. Basically, they wanted to tap into the volcanic activity beneath it. They brought in PNOC-EDC, which is a government-owned corporation, to run the power plant. But here is where the trouble starts. For the next 10 years, from 1993 all the way to 2002, nobody is paying the local real property taxes. Obviously, frustrated by a decade of unpaid bills, the city of Kidapawan takes extreme action in 2003. They issue a warrant of levy, literally threatening to auction off the land.
Which brings us straight to the official Supreme Court case filed to stop the city from auctioning off a 71-hectare national reserve. I mean, the government and PNOC-EDC rushed to the courts claiming, hey, you absolutely cannot sell off a piece of the public domain. And this forces an epic showdown at the highest court in the land.
Moving into Section 2, the legal battle lines, a government entity squaring off against a local tax collector.
So we essentially have a national entity trying to protect its infrastructure and a local government fighting tooth and nail for its tax revenue. PNOC-EDC is claiming complete government immunity. They're arguing, look, we're a government-owned corporation on Republic land, and our contract strictly says we're tax-exempt. But the city of Kidapawan fires right back. Hold on, you control the operations, you take the profits, you are the ones commercially benefiting here, therefore you are the taxable entity.
Section 3. Who really benefits? This is the mystery of the beneficial user.
This concept right here is the absolute pivot point of the entire case. The beneficial user. You see, the Supreme Court doesn't just look at whose name is stamped on the land title, they look at who is actually getting the financial reward. Think of it kind of like renting a house. If you're the one commercially benefiting from the property, the tax liability actually follows you, not just the landlord. So the multi-million peso question becomes, does PNOC-EDC fit this description?
Well, check out this specific number: 40%. PNOCED retains a 40% fee of the net value from the geothermal sales. They aren't managing this site out of the goodness of their hearts, right? They're running an exclusive commercial operation. They even get to deduct their operating expenses from the gross sales before that net value is calculated.
And the contract explicitly confirms this profit retention. Because they're commercially benefiting from the land, they are the taxable beneficial user. Now, PNOC-EDC did try to argue that the government technically pays the income tax on their behalf, but the court saw right through that little loophole. The contract shows the government pays those taxes out of the government's 60% share, acting as an agent. The official tax receipts are literally in PNOC-EDC's name. So the court confirms it. PNOC-EDC is definitely the beneficial user.
Part 4. The limits of tax exemption. Let's see if the local government code changed the rules.
Now, you might be wondering, even if PNOC-EDC is the beneficial user, didn't they have a tax exemption written right into their 1992 contract? Well, the Supreme Court leans on a very powerful legal doctrine here. Taxes are the lifeblood of the nation. Without taxes, local governments simply can't build roads, they can't run schools, they can't provide emergency services. Because they are so vital to you and me, the law really frowns upon tax exemptions. If you claim you don't have to pay, you better have an absolutely airtight legal right to it.
And, unfortunately for PNOC-EDC, their exemption was far from airtight. First off, the Department of Energy didn't even have the legislative authority to grant a tax exemption in the first place. Only Congress can do that. Second, the local government code explicitly withdrew previous real property tax exemptions for government-owned corporations. Because they weren't strictly listed as exempt in the new code, that old contractual loophole, totally closed.
Finally, Section 5. The Supreme Court's verdict, and it's quite a nuanced resolution.
So the city wins, right? They get their taxes. Case closed.
Well, not so fast. Can the city of Kidapawan actually just auction off a piece of a national park to get their money? Before delivering the final verdict, the Supreme Court had to untangle a whole mess of procedural mistakes made by both sides. You see, the law has very specific pathways for resolving these disputes, and frankly, neither party actually followed them.
Let's look at the energy corporation first. In the legal world, you can't just run straight to a trial court when you get a tax bill you don't like. You're supposed to appeal to the local Board of Assessment Appeals within 60 days. PNOC EDC completely ignored this crucial 60-day window. They just waited until the city literally issued a warrant of levy to auction their land before finally crying foul to the courts.
But Kidapawan made a massive blunder of their own. When you look at the final scorecard, the Supreme Court ruled that yes, PNOC EDC is liable for the taxes. However, the city's paperwork tried to auction off the land itself. Remember, the geothermal reservation is part of the Mt. Apo National Park. It is inalienable public land. You literally cannot sell a volcano at a local tax auction. The city could have targeted the private power plant buildings and the machinery, but their specific warrant only listed the land. Because of that one fatal paperwork error, the auction had to be canceled.
So here is the Supreme Court's final word. They officially blocked the city of Kidapawan from levying on the buildings based on that flawed warrant. But the debt doesn't just disappear. It simply means the local government has to take the slow route. They have to pursue a standard civil action in a competent court, instead of doing a quick administrative auction to get their lifeblood. The corporation is legally bound to pay, for sure, but the city has to follow the exact letter of the law to actually collect it.
This case is an absolute masterclass in reading the fine print, but it really leaves us with a lingering and I think fascinating question about accountability. If a vital public service relies on a private corporation making a commercial profit, should those private profits ever be truly shielded from the local community that hosts them? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.